Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to beautiful Austin, Texas. And this is Tim with Michelle. And where are you, Michelle?
Shaker Heights, Ohio.
Ah, beautiful Ohio. We are co-located again, this time, though, via Zoom. I'd like to think we're safe and sound and socially distanced and appropriately distanced at this point. But what we're trying to accomplish today is move you further along with your journey into Stata. Today really focuses more on the idea of how can you do different visualizations. As you might recall, one of Michelle's many strengths is Tableau. And so we try to run a bit of a horse race today that compares the visuals that you can do in Stata with the visuals you can do in Tableau. It's all part of this idea that you need multiple tools. And if you can handle multiple tools, that way you can do your best work. Is that fair, Michelle?
I think that's perfect to say. Yes.
All right. Well, let's get this thing teed up and see where we go.
All right.
And so one of the first things I talk about is always communing with the data. And you might remember I'm an accountant. And as a result, I love my spreadsheets. I love my columns. And so one of the things that I always need to see is what does it look like in that kind of tabular view. So when you open up Stata and you know you're working with this data set because that's the data set that they're also using in your textbook, then you can go up to the command menu or the command line and say, here's my data data menu. I'm going to select the data editor menu, and then I want to see the edit part. And with that, I should be able to get this view, okay? Classic spreadsheet-like view. So if you don't think Stata can give that to you, aha, it's here. Now, as I recall, Michelle, there's also a way to do this in Tableau. Is that right? I forget.
Yeah, so when you initially import your data set in Tableau, you have that data view, and you can also go back to that after creating some visuals just by clicking the data view button. There's a place in the bottom left corner of Tableau to
Oh,
get back to your data, and then the top left.
oh, okay.
You go back
So,
and look at all the different column names, the data types, and everything through that.
so they'll let you get there in a variety of different ways. But when I say know your data, this is one of those things that helps me. So if I'm looking at some of these variables, I say, oh, okay, well, this is the way they've coded this. This is the way they've coded this. Never married. The other thing, though, that I've got are these dots. And that's an indication in Stata that you have a missing data point. For some reason, they didn't record it. So for this observation, for observation 3, we don't have any information about whether they are part of a union or not. So one of the challenges when you clean data is always how you handle the missing data points. And Michelle right now is in the middle of doing a fairly large data cleaning project. And so have you guys run across missing data?
Yes, we ran across a lot of different types of missing data. And depending on what piece of data that is within the large equation, you have to deal and do different things with it. Sometimes if it's a big piece that you're actually running an analysis on, you'll want to delete that column or row or whatever. And then sometimes you will just want to fill it with, say, a mean value if it was, say, age or something like that. So it really depends on what that piece of data is and what value that will provide you with, and how you'll deal with it.
So you guys probably heard in Russ's class, how do you handle some of these different options when it comes to missing data? How do you impute a value if you don't have one? But in this case, this is a 0, 1 kind of variable. So it's a little bit harder to deal with. And so that's what I mean by kind of communing and getting to know your data. One of the things we did in our previous first steps video was we took you through some of the classics in terms of describing your data, the describe, frequency, summarize, and tab. I also took you into one of my favorite things, which is chi-square. I don't know why I like that so much. It's probably because it tends to be a 2 by 2 table. But anyway, we went through that in our previous setting or our previous video. So today our focus is typically going to be on taking a look at our data from a visualization standpoint. But I wanted to tie back one more time to the work that we did in our first visual, because we had this in our first video. We had this in the first video, and one of the things I wanted to point out again was that when we were doing these crosstabs, you could see that you had different totals when it came to observations, and that those totals were different. So this is another indication that you might have a missing data problem. Why is that? And then you get into this issue of what kind of observations do I want to keep? Like Michelle was saying, do I want them that have all the variables defined? Can I work with a situation where I may not? But again, it comes to missing data. And then right behind that comes outliers. And so we're going to talk about those things in just a minute. So one of the other things that may be helpful is this idea of a code book. So this is a command we haven't gone over yet. And you can get a code book just by that straight command, and it'll give you this information for every one of your variables. The problem I have with that is it's a really long report. And so I kind of like it this way. So if you add that one comma compact to it, then you get this all kind of summarized in a way that it's a little easier to see, okay? And the other thing about it is you can find out, like union, for example, has the least number of observations. So you're missing whether they are in a union or not for a specific reason. Now, that could then also get you to some additional questions about, is there a specific group that's not reporting union or non-union? Anyway, there's a lot of underlying factors there, but you can start doing your best Sherlock Holmes at that point. So at that point, we're going to go into our histograms. And these are fairly straightforward in Stata. However, Michelle's going to talk about how to replicate those in Tableau because there's some of these that are clearly better to do in Tableau. Some of them I think may be better in Stata. Well, only one of them I think may be better in Stata. So, but at least you'll know how to kind of look at this. Let's see, where did we go? Oh, okay. First, I'll show you my mistake. So when I put that in, the problem was I put in a comma. You don't want to put in a comma there because you want the histogram to know straight up you're after the variable age. So at that point, you get this graph. If you add discrete, you get this, and the histogram comes together. And so Michelle, wow, that looks better than what I did in Stata. Take us through how we got there.
Yeah, of course. So if you remember when you open the data set in Tableau and you're starting to create a worksheet, knowing that we're trying to create a histogram with the age variable and the number of records, what you can do is click on those two variables and then go to your Show Me tab or drag those pills straight into the columns and rows, and then it will give you this histogram visual. So initially you can just have it as they were all just dark blue plain, but you can always add in Tableau some color, different things like that, just to differentiate the different different bars. But what you can remember is in Tableau you can arrange the bars in different ways. But when you're looking
so
at
that would be really great. So if I could come in here and I could do this, I have the big one that like this, and so they would go like this. So that would be great in this one, right?
No, not necessarily.
Oh,
Sometimes you have to look at you have to look at the variable you're looking at. So something like age, I think it would be a hard one to put in something like you'd want to keep the ages sequential basically, because if you have 35 first and then 36 and then you have 39 and then 41 and then you're back to 34, it's just going to look like it's all over the place. I mean, yes, sometimes you might want to, but when you're just doing that initial age histogram, I think it's best to just keep the ages in order. but it is nice to have that color visual added.
Exactly. So what she's got, what this highlights for us is we've got a group here, but we need to decide what we're going to do with the people that are 45 and the people that are 34, because again, they are less representative right now of all the data we have. Now that may be appropriate. However, it gives us something to think about.
Exactly, and that's the great part about visuals is it helps you look at your data and see which could potentially be outliers in the data set and if you want to limit it down.
Okay, great. One other thing that I would like to harp on right now is this idea of, do you have the right observations? And we were just hinting at that when we were talking about these. Do we have the right data set or the right data in our data set? And so in this one, I went through and did another histogram based on race. And as a result, I know that I have 3 different types: white, black, and other. And the challenge is, okay, I have very few other. And then I have these percentages. I've got significantly more white than black. Is it representative of the overall population? That's ultimately the question, because if it's not, then all the work we're doing is based on flawed data. So that's why you spend so much time cleaning data, trying to understand it, and then seeing if it's actually representative of the overall picture. And I suspect in your current project, that's a big challenge, trying to make sure it's representative of all the clients that your client is trying to deal with.
Definitely, definitely.
And so here's another one where we just did another look at outliers. We graphed this hourly wage. You can start seeing this pattern emerge where there's small pieces out here on the wages. There's probably a better way to show that, and I suspect we will here in just a little bit. But anyway, that's another tool. Now, I'd also like to bring your attention to this. So you'd seen our vertical graphs before for our histograms. You may not like that. You may want something that looks like this. Well, this is one of those situations where you have to go in and request this statistical software component, an SSC. The thing that's interesting about this, it's all community contributed. So all the people that are out there working with Stata, they may come up with small little routines, programs that'll do things for everyone. And so they store them out there, and you can always call them by using this SSC setup. And one other thing then, so once I called this cat plot, I could then use it. Again, I messed this up by putting this label in here. So I got this wrong response, but when I put it in this way, I got this. Okay. One other thing you may not be aware of is Boston College keeps the greatest inventory of these things. And so if you're looking for something, like you think about Russ's class, and you go in and you say, all right, he's asking me to do this one kind of unusual task, then you can go out here and make sure that there's an option for you in Stata. But ultimately, I'm not really that excited about this graph. I mean, I appreciate it, but Michelle says I can beat that. And so she created it this way. And so how'd you get to this one?
So this was just creating a simple bar chart using the number of records and the industry and putting that in the columns and rows there. And then a great thing about this is if you are trying to look at the frequency there, you could arrange those. And this is a perfect example of where you could arrange them by greatest to least, and a great way to be able to look easily and see which industry is most frequent.
And again, is this representative of what we anticipate? And so that's an issue. One other little small detail here is that instead of missing data, Tableau will talk about nulls. Mm-hmm. And is that the same thing as having something missing?
Yes.
Michelle is okay. All right.
Yes, it is. It's the exact same thing. It's okay. Just the way Tableau labels it.
All right, cool. And so, aha, the box plots. And so these are really stat driven. Okay. And so that's why Stata, I think, is better at these than Tableau is.
I would
And,
agree.
and one of the reasons is I can box plot wage on its own, but this allows me to bifurcate it over a second variable. So in this case, I'm looking at wages, but now I can also split those boxes across the different categories of race. And so if I was looking at this, I would say, okay, the potential for outliers here is much greater in the category of white respondents, not as intense perhaps in this group. And I don't know who that is, but they got to go. So anyway, you can start getting a sense of where they are. The other thing you're looking at is where, oops, kind of where those second quartiles are. And they're all reasonably close, but there is certainly some variation in there that might take you to interesting use of a t-test. So that's the way I would go at it. Now, let's take a look at Tableau's approach, and it looks similar. They use, instead of the dots, they're using the whiskers. So take us through that one. How did you get there?
So under the Show Me tab, Tableau also has a box plot section. So as you can see, and as Professor West said, it definitely doesn't have as much detail as the Stata one. Yes, it does show you the basics, but you can't break it down by that race category like you can with Stata, which is, I guess, one of the downsides of Tableau for this tool. So yes, Tableau can be useful for the other graphs, but in this situation, I would choose Stata over Tableau.
Okay, and we were talking about the Show Me tab earlier. Remember, it's that tab that's kind of up here in the right top of the Tableau screen, and it's a pop-down menu that gives you options in terms of the different kinds of graphics that you want to use.
Yes.
So anyway, it's now, if you're keeping score, it's Tableau 2, Stata 1 when it comes to visualizations. All right. Now, oh, this looks very promising from a Stata standpoint. Okay, so a couple of things that they talk about. These things are coming essentially from the book. You can scatter these off a variety of different things, but one of the things they do is they give you this opportunity to do what they call as a jitter, which is try to move all the points just a little bit so they're not stacked totally on top of each other, which can kind of throw things off. The other one you can use is color, and you can get a variety of those different things to set up your color. But those are the graphs. You can certainly come in with some extra commands and try to approximate some sort of line. But they also then tell you a little bit about another tool. And the other tool is this bin scatter. Uh, that sounds like it's German. He's in the bin scatter. But it reduces the amount of data and starts setting that trend line in place and gives you a sense, all right, whether you're working with data that might have a linear kind of approach to it. And so with that, let's see if Tableau can compete with that, my friend. Oh, go ahead.
So Tableau also does scatter plots pretty well. So this was just using the wage and total experience and dragging those measures into the columns and rows. So you can see that it's demonstrated pretty well here. And just like the bin scatter in Stata, you have the capacity to add a trend line in Tableau, which is a great feature. And also,
Do you recall how to get to that trend line? I
I
can't
believe
remember it right now.
I believe it's right clicking on the graph and then being
Okay.
able to add it.
I think you're exactly right. So if I right click, I get a pop down.
Yeah, and then there's some options there, and I believe adding a trend line is
Okay.
in there,
Thanks.
if I'm remembering correctly.
Okay.
And then from that also, that's I think another option in your right click is getting to add a regression equation and then seeing those R squared and P values. And that's always a great thing to add to a graph, no matter what software you're using, because it's a useful piece of information.
There you go. And we've only got an R squared of 0.07 here. Well, think back to what our challenge is, right? We've got a lot of potential outliers. And so the decision of what to do with those won't be trivial. And so with that, we're going to conclude the visual part of our day and the horse race between Stata and Tableau. And I must say, Tableau wins 3-1 when it comes to visuals. Uh, Everyone, let's hear it for the box plot. That's the only one saving it. All right, Michelle, thanks a lot. I hope you're enjoying Shaker Heights, Ohio. And and if you get snow, too bad for you. I'm in Austin, Texas, and it's beautiful. So, but I am in the Fortress of Solitude. So take care, everybody, and we will talk to you again pretty soon. So be safe and be healthy.